What happens when a media-savvy duchess walks into the lion's den of real journalism? Tamron Hall didn't just ask questions, she dismantled Meghan Markle's narrative, and it all unfolded live, uncut, and unfiltered. Before we break down this interview, moment by moment, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the real stories behind the headlines. And exit mid. Gasps rippled through the studio. Meghan Markle stood from her chair, jaw tight, eyes locked on Tamron Hall. Tamron raised her hand, not in anger, but in command. The cameras kept rolling. The silence said more than words ever could. This was not your average daytime chat. There were no scripted laughs or polite sidesteps. This was not a soft launch or a royal rebrand. This was a collision between image and truth, between practiced answers and pointed questions. It was raw, it was real, and it happened live. When Meghan Markle walked onto Tamron Hall's show, she expected a conversation. What she got was a confrontation. Tamron came prepared, with facts, timelines, and the kind of questions publicists usually screen out. Meghan came with a message, but messages do not hold up under heat if they are not built on something solid. What started as a friendly segment slowly turned into something else. The smiles faded, the posture changed, the words grew sharper, and then without warning, Meghan got up and walked out. No goodbyes, no final word. Just a studio frozen in shock. This was more than a celebrity moment, it was a media moment, a test of how far someone can push their version of the truth before the facts start pushing back. It was Tamron Hall versus Meghan Markle. It was a showdown we did not expect on daytime television, and it left viewers around the world picking sides. So what really happened that day? Why did Meghan walk off? And what did Tamron say that no one else had the nerve to ask? Before we dive into the full story, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on the bell. You will not want to miss what happens next. Because this was not just a talk show. This was a reckoning. Tamron Hall's show started like it always does. The set looked calm, polished, and professional. Warm lighting, soft background music, and a well-dressed audience ready for another episode of thoughtful conversation. The mood was relaxed. Everything about it felt familiar, even safe. Then Meghan Markle walked in. She stepped onto the stage with a calm smile and perfect posture. Dressed in soft tones and subtle jewelry, she gave off the image of someone in full control, confident, composed, and camera-ready. She greeted Tamron with warmth and settled into her chair like she had done this 100 times. Because she had 2 viewers at home, this felt like another stop on a carefully planned promo tour. Meghan had been making more appearances lately. Interviews, documentaries, podcasts. She had been working to shape her story in the media again. Some people praised her for speaking out. Others questioned her motives. But everyone watched. Tamron started with a few soft questions, just enough to break the ice. Meghan answered with ease. She spoke about mental health, motherhood, and finding her voice. The audience nodded. It all felt polished, predictable. But then came the first real question, and everything shifted. Tamron leaned in slightly. Her tone changed, just a little, enough to notice. She asked about privacy, not in a vague way, but directly. You say, you wanted privacy, so why all the public deals? The Netflix show, the book, the podcast. There was a pause. Meghan blinked, just once. Then she smiled again. But it was not the same smile. The atmosphere shifted. You could feel it, even through the screen. The air in the studio went still. Tamron did not look away. That was the moment people stopped watching casually. That was when they knew this was not going to be just another friendly interview. Something deeper was about to unfold. So if you are into high-stakes celebrity interviews and behind-the-scenes breakdowns, subscribe now. Because what happened next will change how you see both of these women. And it only gets more intense from here. Tamron leaned in just enough to let the next question land with weight. Her tone was calm, but there was no soft edge. She looked Meghan directly in the eye and said, "You have spoken about wanting privacy, that you stepped back from royal life to protect your peace, but then you signed a multi-million-dollar deal with Netflix, a Spotify podcast, a best-selling memoir. Help me understand that." The studio stayed silent. Meghan took a slow breath and nodded. She gave a polite smile and shifted slightly in her seat. Her response came smooth, practiced. She said she never wanted complete silence. She said it was about control, that telling her own story was different from being chased by tabloids, that there was a difference between privacy and secrecy. Tamron listened. She did not interrupt. She waited until Meghan finished, then she asked again, this time more direct. "So when you say you want control of your story, do you mean you only want press when you are the one writing the script?" That landed. Meghan's posture changed. She sat up straighter. Her smile faded just a little. She glanced off stage, maybe at a producer or her team. Then she looked back at Tamron and said, "I think that is unfair." But Tamron was ready. She began to quote Meghan's own words from past interviews, pulled from headlines, played a Short clip where Meghan said the royal family offered no protection from press attacks. Then another where she described signing her deals as a way to reclaim the narrative. Tamron asked, if the goal is healing, why open up the wounds on the biggest platforms in the world? Meghan looked frozen for a second, not angry, just unsure. That wall of confidence from earlier started to crack. She answered, but it felt less certain this time. She said she believed her story mattered, that sharing it could help others. That vulnerability was powerful. Tamron nodded, but the silence that followed said she was not fully buying it. Clips of public opinion began to scroll across the screen. Headlines from both supporters and critics. Social media posts saying, you cannot ask for privacy and then drop a docuseries. Others saying, she is just trying to be heard. The tension grew. You could feel the distance forming between guest and host. Tamron was not being hostile, but she was not letting go, and Meghan was no longer gliding through. She was trying to keep her balance. This was no longer an interview. It was a challenge, and for the first time, Meghan did not seem fully in control. Tamron's expression stayed calm, but her questions kept cutting deeper. She shifted the focus from privacy to something sharper: control. She looked at Meghan and said, a lot of people feel like your interviews are not really interviews. They feel like performances. Carefully planned, carefully edited, fully controlled. Meghan opened her mouth, but Tamron kept going. There are reports from producers saying you require guest approval, that certain questions are off limits, that your team sends over lists before you even arrive, that nothing goes unplanned. The audience stayed silent. Meghan smiled again, but this one felt thinner, less natural. She said, when you have been misrepresented for years, you learn to protect yourself. Tamron nodded but pressed on. But is it protection, or is it manipulation? Meghan blinked. Then she said, that is your word, not mine. Tamron paused. Then she brought up the Netflix docuseries clips had leaked. Behind-the-scenes footage, scripts, storyboards, scenes that felt too perfect, too polished, to be real. Critics called it a rebranding campaign, not a documentary. Then came Oprah. Tamron reminded everyone about that moment. The backyard interview. That stopped the world. Soft cushions, warm lighting, emotional confessions. But then came the backlash. People started asking what was left out, what was shaped, what was exaggerated. Tamron looked Meghan in the eye and said, you want us to believe you are being raw and open, but it feels like you are always producing the story. That line hit hard. Meghan sat still. You could see her jaw tighten. She tried to steer things away. She brought up charity work, motherhood, resilience. She said she wanted to inspire, not stir controversy. Tamron let her speak. But when Meghan finished, she said, this is not about being a mother. This is about public trust. The air got thick. Tamron leaned in again. She said, you are not just telling your truth, you are shaping the public truth. And when people push back, you say they are attacking you. That is not just unfair. That is power without accountability. Meghan took a slow breath. She looked down, then back up. For the first time, she looked tired, like the weight of the words was setting in. The tension was real now. You could feel it through the screen. Tamron was not attacking. She was holding the line, and Meghan was struggling to hold the narrative. The control that once felt effortless now looked forced. The cracks were showing, and the room was watching. The room was already tense, but then Tamron touched the subject that always stings: family, leaned slightly forward and asked, what about your father? Meghan's smile disappeared. Tamron's voice stayed even, not cold, but careful. You have spoken at length about betrayal, about people close to you selling stories. But some viewers ask, how can the public fully trust your version when you have distanced yourself from nearly every blood relative? Meghan's posture shifted, her back straightened, her fingers folded tight in her lap. She answered, when people you love go to the media for a check instead of calling you directly, that speaks for itself. Tamron nodded, but she did not stop there. What about the letters? She asked. The private letter you wrote your father, which then showed up in the press. That became a lawsuit. And during that trial, your team had to admit you worked with the authors of Finding Freedom, that you were involved. The audience stayed silent. Meghan's eyes flicked sideways, as if measuring every word in her head. She replied, the letter was deeply personal. I never intended for it to be public. What my father did broke my heart. Tamron pulled up a quote on the screen behind her, a clip from thomasmarkle.com, gray-haired, seated in a modest home. I never stopped loving my daughter. He had said, I just want to speak to her, but everything goes through lawyers now. It was a hard clip to watch. Tamron turned back and asked, does it not raise questions when nearly your entire side of the family is out of the picture? Your father, your half-siblings, even extended cousins. They all have the same story. That you cut them off and then rebranded. Meghan's voice grew sharper. She said, there is a difference between protecting your peace and abandoning people who repeatedly hurt you. Tamron nodded slowly, then asked, can both be true? That line hung in the air. Meghan's expression flickered. For a split second, she looked less like the poised Duchess and more like someone cornered. Someone tired, she said. You cannot understand what it feels like unless you have lived it. The pressures, the attacks, the way people twist your life for profit. Tamron replied softly, but that is what people say you do to them. There was a pause, a long one. Meghan did not respond. This was not gossip. This was not a ratings ploy. This was one woman asking another to face the hardest part of her story. The part no PR team could polish. No script could soften. And it showed. Then Tamron stepped into the deepest, most sensitive part of the conversation. The topic that had lit up headlines for years. She looked directly at Meghan and said, "Let us talk about the interview with Oprah, about the moment you said there were conversations about your son's skin color before he was born." The room felt different after that. Still, heavy. Tamron continued. That was a serious accusation. It shook the world. But you never said who made that comment. People have asked. The press has asked. The public has asked. Can you name who said it? Meghan took a breath. Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes did not. I said what I said, she replied. Those were the conversations happening behind closed doors. That was my truth. Tamron leaned in, not aggressively, but clearly, not ready to move on. But does truth not need context? She asked. You brought race into a conversation watched by millions. You accused someone in the royal family of racism, yet gave no name, no details. Do you not think that creates more harm than clarity? Meghan shifted in her seat. There were multiple conversations, she said, and I will not expose the people involved because I know what it will do. Tamron gave a tight nod. Then, are we supposed to just accept the claim as fact, without proof, without accountability? In the audience, you could hear a few gasps. Someone whispered something under their breath. The air tightened again. Pressed on, you are accusing a centuries-old institution. You are calling it racist, but you are refusing to back it up with names or actual examples. That is not just damaging. That is defaming. Without receipts. Meghan blinked fast. Her hands, once calm in her lap, were now gripping the edge of her seat. The conversation happened, she repeated, and it hurt. Tamron softened her tone slightly, but she stayed firm. No one is doubting that your experience was painful. What people are asking is why drop such a massive accusation, then walk away when the questions come. If someone said something that awful, why not hold them accountable? Meghan glanced away, then answered, because I know the headlines it will cause. The wars it will start inside that family. Tamron looked at her for a long beat, then said, but the war already started, and you fired the first shot. That sentence echoed. Not because it was loud, but because it was honest. This was no longer about television or trending clips. It was about trust. About what it means when a public figure makes a claim that it affects millions, then shields the details behind silence. The cameras stayed fixed. On Meghan's face, she said nothing more, and in that silence, the tension spoke for itself. The room was already tense. Meghan had been dodging, redirecting, defending. But Tamron was not letting up. Meghan tried once more to steer the conversation. She shifted the topic to her charity work, her focus on empowering young girls. Her new podcast. Tamron listened, then calmly interrupted. You are here for an interview, not a monologue. The words landed hard, not shouted, not cruel, just clear. Meghan paused. Her jaw tightened. She looked at Tamron for a long moment. Then she said, I do not think this is respectful. Tamron stayed seated, her hands folded. I gave you a platform, she said. You asked for space to tell your story, and I listened. But what you did not expect was accountability. The cameras kept rolling. No one in the audience moved. You could almost hear the cameras worry. Then Meghan stood up. She smoothed her dress and looked off stage. This is not what I agreed to, she said quietly, more to herself than to Tamron. Assistants appeared just out of frame. One walked toward her, unsure if they should intervene. Tamron did not follow. She stayed in her chair. She did not raise her voice. She just watched. Meghan adjusted her mic and walked off camera. Her heels echoed softly on the floor. No goodbye, no handshake. Just a slow walk away from the conversation she once owned. Back on the set, Tamron turned to the camera. Not with drama, just calm. The moment spoke louder than words. Tamron sat in silence for a moment. The chair across from her was empty now. The cameras were still rolling, but the energy in the room had shifted. She turned to face the audience. Her voice was calm but steady. That was not just a celebrity walking off. That was a moment of truth. She took a breath and let it settle. What you saw was someone uncomfortable with questions. Not insults, not attacks, just questions that millions of people have been asking. She paused again. She says she wants privacy, yet signs deals with streaming platforms and gives global interviews. She speaks of honesty, but controls what can and cannot be asked. She claims transparency, but walks away when the conversation turns real. Tamron leaned forward slightly. Media is not just a tool for branding. It is a responsibility. It is not about being liked, it is about asking what matters, even when it is uncomfortable. The studio lights reflected off the polished floor. The moment was still raw. In a world where celebrity often drowns out truth, journalism has to hold the line. Not with cruelty, not with bias, but with courage. Tamron looked into the lens. This show is not about takedowns. It is about conversations that matter. And if someone is not ready for that, then maybe they are not ready for the spotlight they chose. She leaned back in her chair. The mic stayed on. The message was clear. Within minutes of the episode airing, social media caught fire. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, even Facebook lit up. One clip, just 30 seconds long, showed Meghan standing up and walking off. It spread like wildfire. The hashtag #TAMRON, exposed Meghan started trending within the hour. Some called it bold journalism. Others saw it as a public takedown. The internet was split. One tweet read, "Finally, someone held Meghan accountable. Respect to Tamron." Another pushed back, saying, "This was a trap. Tamron ambushed her on national TV." The comments poured in, fast and passionate. On YouTube, reaction videos exploded. Some creators broke down every word. Others praised Tamron's tone and calm delivery. A few were furious, calling it a publicity stunt. Podcasts jumped on the story, from celebrity gossip shows to serious media roundtables. Everyone had something to say. The tabloids took their usual shots. But this time, some mainstream outlets stepped in with surprising praise for Tamron. Headlines framed her not just as a daytime host, but as a real journalist, someone who asked tough questions and did not flinch. Inside the industry, the reaction was just as loud. Media experts, publicists, even talk show producers weighed in. Many said Tamron had drawn a line. Not out of drama, but out of principle. This was more than a viral moment. It was a flashpoint, a reminder that public image only goes so far when real questions enter the room. And the fallout, for both women, was only just beginning. This was never just about royalty. It was about something bigger. It was about accountability. When someone shares their story on a public stage, people expect honesty, not just headlines. So, was Tamron too harsh? Or was this the truth finally catching up to the narrative? That is the real question. And it is one only you can answer. We want to hear your voice. Was this a win for journalism or a moment of unnecessary confrontation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Be real, be bold. We are listening, and if you are here for moments where truth cuts through the noise, then make sure you subscribe. Hit that like button. Turn on the bell. Join the conversation, because this is where the real talk happens.